All right, recording is started. So this morning our topic is the Columbus Southside Area Commission with the focus first on the business at large seat that Curtis Davis holds and the zoning committee that Curtis chairs. Curtis, the floor is yours.
I feel old when you said Kurt Davis. I was like, oh my, that sounds like someone from my past calling me Kurt Davis. Good morning, everybody. So most of you guys are pretty familiar with the zoning code or the zoning process. The process is actually up on our website now, our webpage that the city provides us to. So some of the highlights maybe for Sarah that has or hasn't dealt with this in the past. You know, we get a demo permit. You know, the commission's policy is that there's a 10-day business window for someone to object, you know, with a legal reason why it should not be granted. And then I sign off on it. We've been slow on demos in the last, 3 or 4 months, but I anticipate those will start to pick back up as the COVID crap goes away and summertime comes. On normal zoning variances, when I get those, normally within 24 hours, I send them out to the committee and to the civic affected and to the commissioners. So we have a committee, and we've been trying to get at least one person from each of the areas to commit to it. Some areas that we have more people than what we have allotted. So that's something that's, if there's someone in a different area that wants to be on the zoning committee that has property or has engagement, or wants to be engaged, they're more than welcome to do that. So when I get those applications, and I just got one yesterday afternoon for the Ronald McDonald House, which is getting ready to expand, and they're coming before us for multiple variances. I haven't looked at the whole thing yet, just because it's Jill Tagman, who works for Voorhees, sent a 59-page application, and obviously she gets paid by the hour, so that was probably the reason why it was 59 pages of lots of stuff. So when that goes out, it goes out to the civic. The civic then needs to review it and give us a vote within 45 days of them receiving it. One of the things that we're going to try to do this year, and we've tried in the past a little bit, not probably as aggressive we should, is to educate civics and civic leaders and just general people in the community of what can and can't be considered when zoning matters come before either the commission, the BZA, the Development Commission, or City Council. A lot of folks feel that on the south side, they can start to bring in scenarios like, what kind of brick are you using? What color is it going to be? Things like that. Those are things that are irrelevant to zoning. The same way with traffic. Yes, it is a part of the zoning process, but that is not something that should not be effective of what the applicant is requesting. A lot of the general questions that are asked or requested is like vision triangles. And a vision triangle is something where, so can a car see around something? Sometimes there's side lot setbacks or reductions of side lots. Those are kind of the common everyday request because, someone's trying to build something that, in the inner neighborhood, it's hard to not be, right on at the property line. Things, again, that can't be considered is if they're going to put a rooftop in. That has no bearing on the zoning as long as it's built to code and, it's there. Folks want to assume that, someone, Erin's little property at Whittier, they think they're going to put 300 people on top of it. That's not going to happen. There is building codes. There is a capacity level that the city sets for any, whether if it's a rooftop, a patio, or an inside venture. They say that X amount of people can be in here at any given time. So again, irrelevant to the scenario or situation. The other thing that's coming up more and more, and we've seen this with the 280 Whittier project, is density. We're going to have density. The city recognizes major corridors as areas that they want to be dense, meaning Livingston Avenue, Parsons, Lockbourne, I said Whittier. Those are major corridors to where density would be appropriate. And I use the terminology, which I got hammered in the newspaper about, is that if someone wanted to buy Tom Grody's house and bulldoze it and put a 5-story, building there, that would be inappropriate because it's in the core of a neighborhood. It's not on a, it's not on a Whittier, it's not on a high street. So the density thing is going to happen more and more. I think we're going to see it along South High Street. I just got another heads up on a affordable housing development that's going to be going on Barthman at High Street. The NRP group will be doing that. I don't believe that Michael, I have a brain fart and they're in my building. Anyway, wow, that's awful that I've been having like memory problems the last couple of days. I don't know what's affecting that, but the folks that are doing the community housing project on South High Street or on Parsons Avenue, they are going to be renovating and putting 2 commercial properties on the ground floor. The application come over as the Southside Hotel LLC. So I don't think he's putting a hotel in there. Maybe that was just the name that he used. Michael Kelly. So the Kelly companies is going to be the ones that will buy that off of the community housing partners, and they're going to be redeveloping it. So there won't be an issue with, height. There will be an issue with parking. So parking, I think the reduction is from 58 to 8. So again, those are scenarios that, could be coming before the commission and people will start asking questions. One of the things is that I think we're going to start seeing more and more of that being reduced. What the city's going to ask for, just because I think they're going to start throwing in bike racks and they're going to start throwing in other alternative modes of transportation. What kind of housing is it going to be? Who's it going to be serving? So hopefully with the new building code that they're currently working on, that will also start to alleviate some of those issues and some of those problems when it comes to someone seeing, hey, we're reducing 58 down to 8. Do we really need it? Do we not? So those are scenarios that could come up, in a discussion. I'm trying to think of some other projects that, would be straightforward projects. We've got another one that Vassar Village is hearing this evening. It's on Parsons Avenue. It's right next to Brian Daniels' building where the cell shop and the accounting firm is. The gentleman is going to remove that big cement pad and demo that house and build a brand new house there. So that'll be another improvement, but that one should, again, be a straightforward application, because it's a mixed use type of situation or scenario. Some other variances that have come up in one of them that, Blake, if you guys were listening when Blake came on, Blake and Nationwide Children's Hospital went to the city and via the commission last year to get a temporary special permit to allow parking where a car lot used to be. And God bless, we don't need any more car lots on Parsons Avenue. So that was wonderful that they were going to use it for parking. So we sometimes have been requested to do special permits. We've done other special permits for like Cornicacosing or Cocosing Construction over in Vassar Village. They got a 2-year special permit to allow for some construction trailers and some storage and stuff like that. After that 2 years is done, the applicant has to come back to the city and to the commission and request either an extension and or just a permanent variance for the property. But again, you know, sometimes they do that because they don't know what they're going to do on the property. And a good example is the property the Nationwide Children's has there that's going to have the temporary parking. They also own the cleaning company business building. So that could be bulldozed. That could be a part of Ronald McDonald House. You know, no one knows, you know, so again, those are scenarios that come by or come through to us. The other thing that—
add, Curtis, a little bit of commentary about city staff reports.
Yes.
Synk engineering and, you know, parking studies.
Right. So city staff reports are very valuable for any individual or any person to kind of better understand the process. So when an applicant submits stuff, they not only submit stuff, you know, just directly to the city, but it goes to almost, I think there's like 32 different departments right now or entities within the city. So it goes to, you know, city water and sewer, it goes to refuge, it goes to public safety, excuse me, the health department, traffic, you know, everybody's involved. So these folks are trained professionals. So one of the things that, you know, I've tried, and Kathy has kind of assisted me, you know, wholeheartedly in the last 18 months, which I'm grateful for, that, you know, city staff, a lot of folks on the south side didn't even know what it was. You know, Kathy would come to meetings and say, hey, city staff said, and they're like all looking glazed over, like, what do you mean? You know, they think that they were personally talking to Kathy, but they were doing a report and they upload that into the portal. So one of the things that I've encouraged folks to do is to read that, review it. These folks are all trained professionals, meaning that, you know, a lot of them went to college and school for this. And, you know, some of them have 10, 15, 20 years of experience. They know what's happening in the city. They also know national trends. So they know what's happening in other cities and how they've addressed them and everything like that. And a good example is that we have a zoning variance right now that's going to be before the commission in March. Excuse me, that is at Lockbourne and Freebus, and city staff is recommending the building be put up to the street, you know, with a sidewalk to make it a walkable neighborhood. So they're trying to set the tone for Lockbourne Road and Freebus to become, you know, possibly another Parsons Avenue where, you know, it's walkable, you know, businesses can be, you know, put together and people can walk from, you know, the neighborhood and stuff to shop and to go to the different entities and stuff along there. And Connie Boykin, who used to be a prior commissioner, who was a school teacher, actually paid attention to me and said, you know, called me and said, hey, Kurt, what about this? And I said, hey, you're spot on. You know, city staff, they're doing it for a reason. You know, they're doing walkable neighborhoods. You know, Connie had a valid point, and, you know, their civic was concerned and didn't want to vote because of that issue. Now, one of our other commissioners, you know, thought there was going to be a traffic issue. So we kind of held it up a little longer than the norm, found out that there wasn't any issues with traffic. I think it's a toss-up right now. I think there's a lot of commissioners that feel that, you know, we want walkable neighborhoods on the south side, and we want to start to set that trend, you know, or that message that, you know, we don't want, you know, stuff set so far back from the road that, you know, it doesn't give the feel of a, you know, I look at the south side as kind of a mini Columbus, you know, and trying to put stuff together, you know, more homey, more, you know, we don't want it sprawled out, you know, in that aspect. So, so I think that one might, you know, get defeated by the commission. Maybe they won't. But again, one of the other problems.
Before you move on from that, Curtis, I just wanted to make one point, right?
Yep.
Also on the zoning committee. And Lockbourne's a little bit of a different animal. and I wasn't 100% aware of all of the, the code differences, right? So the city zoning code currently, which, and Curtis, I do want you to come back to the zoning survey.
Yep.
So the code actually has this urban commercial overlay that has a different set of development standards. And that's part of Livingston, part of Lockbourne, Parsons Avenue, and South Front Street. Those are all part of the urban commercial overlay. And then there's also a community commercial overlay that also includes part of Lockbourne. So this particular parcel that Curtis mentions, because they're combining two different parcels, one was in the urban commercial overlay and the other was in the community commercial overlay with different development standards. And the part in the urban commercial overlay, which has more supportive screening and landscaping requirements, that part of the parcel will be held to those standards. And there seemed to be a lot of ignorance on that topic, including from the plan developer themselves. And so they have amended their plan to conform to that part versus seeking a variance. So, there's a lot of areas that we need to be aware of. And again, people like Blake Compton and Erin Priest are I'm sure, very, very, very familiar, but many of the rest of us may not be quite as familiar. We as PAMA are taking votes now from the trustees on any commercial, manufacturing, industrial, institutional type variants, so that like the entire board becomes more familiar with the processes and the trade-offs. We also weigh in on apartment residential. So residential has multiple classifications. And so some of the affordable housing developments that Curtis mentioned, but even some of the larger apartment developments like the Bizzuti project on Whittier, or there's a smaller one going in on the corner of Washington and Morrill, or I forget exactly the cross street in Marion Village. So, those are all we consider to be commercial and of interest to PAMA. So we have all of that. So again, Curtis, going back to, and one more point on the urban commercial overlay. If you drive down Parsons, you can see, which things were developed after the code, honestly. So the Kroger, the O'Reilly Auto Parts all do have additional screening and landscaping along Parsons, but TJ's, as an example, does not. And so it's just a big old parking lot sitting in front of a building. And so, back to the point of making a more attractive streetscape and more walkable streetscape, we're in favor of that. Okay, back to you.
Okay, so one of the other things that the city is starting to do is the updating of the city zoning code. And Tony Celebrezzi is telling us that it's probably going to be, an 18 to 24, maybe a 36-month process. They have initially already did a survey of 50 individuals, a variety of individuals. So they did contractors, area commissioners, general civic leaders. I think they did some architects, some attorneys that do zoning. So there was like a mixed mosh of folks that they initially talked to. And one of the things that I did intentionally was I became the 50th person to do the interview, because I wanted to do an exit interview on the interviewers. And so as we were talking about stuff, one of the, I asked him, I said, what was the biggest thing that you heard from folks? And it was the same thing that, I had heard by talking to most of the zoning chairs in the city. It was the communication from the city of Columbus of how the process works, what they can and can't consider, how things happen. And then obviously the streamlining of the process, meaning, each commission's different. So, Erin has been lucky that a lot of his stuff has been on the south side. So he, he kind of knows, the process, because he's not jumping from different commissions and stuff. On the flip side is, Blake has, done stuff all over the city, and even some of the suburbs. So again, they're going to try to streamline that process, moving forward, so that, if Erin or Blake or any applicant goes to the city, the process is going to hopefully be 85, 90% the same thing versus, folks going all over left field, wanting to discuss stuff. So, another good example is, folks asking for different, different things to be added and deleted. I don't think you're going to see a lot of the things that some people want. And then I know that, folks have come back and questioned some of the density issues or the way something's laid out. And a unique project that I think people overlook this, and I guess I didn't realize even who owned it, but Erin's working on a project right now in Marion Village that's beside the Kroger store, or to the north of the Kroger store. And I know that Erin had ran into some challenges with the neighborhood. And I don't know, Erin, if you want to expound on some of the things or the things that the folks kind of challenged you on when you initially brought this for them.
That plus, Erin, if you could also talk about how the zoning code increases the cost of development, and then maybe Blake can weigh in as well.
Yeah, sure. So this time, is my mic working?
You are.
Cool. So the Marion Village site, when I first acquired the rights to it, I just closed in January. Some feedback was around density and a lot about affordable housing. And I did meet with the Marion Village Civic, and I guess this could come to where things get expensive. Hi, Erin. I spent quite a bit of money on the architect and came up with some plans for a multifamily. The closest I can get to true affordability or attainability as a private developer is what I strive to achieve. And it became clear that that project wasn't going to be well received, where I could provide that level of mix of housing. So we went back to the drawing board, and I am working with Lori Gunzelman on a slightly denser townhouse project, trying possibly for a mix of for sale and for rent units, or possibly all for sale. We are doing some cool things with trying to, in our own development, differentiate walkable paths and front doors and separate driving areas. So you'd see that from previous. Work on the walkability even within our own development. So I'd say watch for updates on that in the next couple of months. Hopefully I'd be in front of the Civic, I'd say 60 days, and trying to move forward. And then the cost of the development. So the city staff, I have a lot of respect for them. Even when they challenge me, sometimes they're right. They're open to dialogue. Usually if they say something, it has merit. They do think about the neighborhoods. And then you move into the actual neighborhood and you go to the meetings and you're there to get grilled. A lot of things are said not based on fact or merit, and you pay your architect and your attorney to go around in circles for weeks or months, and the numbers can get astronomical. And then the cost of those iterations and timeframes is also, what makes us as developers maybe not go for the projects that is what people would like to see, as far as, we have our insight studies and stuff. But then if we run into, concrete walls when it comes to gaining the necessary variances and entitlements, we're going to back off doing what maybe is ideal. So I don't know if that answers the question. But.
Yeah, that kind of gives you some idea. And then the other thing is, and I kind of couple of things that we can't take in consideration, and one of them's like a double-edged sword is, you know, what's the rents going to be? Are they going to be affordable housing? You know, is there going to be those things? Because again, that has no bearing. Now the city does have a caveat. If you do tax, abatements, you're required to do X amount. But that's a city policy and has nothing to on the basis of the variance going through. It's we're focused on the construction of the property, not how it's going to be managed or run. Would that be correct saying that, Erin, the way I said it? Or
it would, and I don't know how to, some people manage meetings better to keep that on point. Affordable housing in neighborhood design, I mean, there's overlap, and the city does a good job of that, especially within their, tax incentive programs. But yeah, the type of rents and stuff, if we need more affordable housing in an area, usually that's a nonprofit developer coming in to fill that role, and there's a need for both. But how it gets mixed into like an individual projects conversation in relation to zoning, I think that people do it because it's effective, and.
Yeah, and just to add to that, the city is also reevaluating their community reinvestment areas, or CRAs, and that is also anticipated to be ready by August. And so once that's done, I'd like to invite probably Hannah Reed or someone like that to come and speak to us. So in the interest of time, and Miss Erin,
if I can jump in quick.
Oh yeah, please, Carly.
I'm working on a report on this exact issue right now, and you're getting a few days lead, I think, on the general public. But we just completed some surveys and some research on how much costs are attributable to different zoning issues. And what we found is that reform in either the site and building review process and those development standards, the public hearing and engagement process, or the parking and circulation standards, each of those stand to reduce costs to affordable housing by 10%, which means that if we had comprehensive reform in all three of those areas, at least in theory, we could reduce affordable housing expenses in the budget by 30%.
Wow.
We just hit one of those, looking at the average multifamily project from earlier this year. Just addressing one of them comprehensively could save over $1 million per project, over $23,000 per unit. And that's an immense amount of affordability we'd be able to gain.
Yeah, we'll be looking forward to seeing that, Carly. And the Area Commission does also have a safety, health, equity, and welfare and equity committee. And so we do also, kind of have various committees that work together because welfare and equity are important as well. So great. Erin, Synk, the floor now is yours. I think you probably know most people on the phone, but the topic for you today is what the Public Services Committee has been up to, how you work with the city, and then obviously your ask on the Urban Infrastructure Redevelopment Fund topic.
Fantastic. Well, hi, everybody. It's nice to see all of you. I do know most of you, so good morning. As Kathy said, I chair the Public Services Committee for the Area Commission, and it's a pretty broad umbrella, but basically if it's a sort of a service provided to residents and businesses by the city, it probably falls under the Public Services Committee. So this is everything from refuse and recycling collection, to we put Parks and Rec underneath there, to transportation, all sort of falls under this umbrella of things that we look at. So we've spent a lot of time lately talking about traffic, looking at things, whether it's road diets, increasing safety for road users, particularly pedestrians. So that one comes up a lot, particularly along Parsons, but on some of the other corridors as well. Hot spots like Whittier and Phoebus at Champion and Ohio. are places that we've had concern. We've had a lot of focus from residents recently at the Parsons and Livingston intersection. I think especially with the construction just north of the hospital, it's having an effect on traffic patterns. And I know we're seeing some concerning behaviors with how people are using turning lanes and maybe even running red lights and things like that. So working with the city to try to address those concerns and ensure that, like I said, that walkability. So coming up this spring, the city is contracting with a consultant to do a sort of pedestrian walkability study of Parsons Avenue. So I've heard that that's going to start kicking off. And so they're looking at what are the barriers, where are there opportunities to reconfigure things and provide, like I said, better access for pedestrians across that street. Because if you've tried to cross Parsons and someplace where there isn't a signaled crosswalk, you know that can be a little challenging. This goes back to, I guess, 2019, did a comprehensive review of parks. And so we went to all of the parks and looked at the conditions of the amenities there, things like benches, walking paths, shelter houses, playgrounds, and made a priority list from the community about what we wanted to see improved upon or repaired. And so we've been working with the city through that. And so I'm happy to say that in the capital improvements plans for this year, we're starting to see a lot of those come up. So for example, Millbrook Park, that was kind of top of our list. It was a park that hadn't seen a lot of investment in a while, is getting a pretty substantial facelift this spring. And so they're going to be, repaving basketball courts and putting in new playground structures and things like that. One of the programs that we use to do that, and this is what Kathy referenced, the UIRF, which stands for the Urban Infrastructure Revitalization Fund. And so this is a capital improvement program that the city runs that really tries to bring in a lot of community involvement. And so they created a program that focuses on the 1950s city boundary. So, we had a lot of annexation post the 1950s, and there was a realization a while ago that pre-1950 city boundary had aging infrastructure that was in need of some investment. So it directs a certain amount of funding towards those kinds of projects. And we approved a plan for each area on about a 5-year timeline. So I noticed that we are working through and nearly complete with the current 5-year plan for the Southside Area Commission. There's only a couple of projects still lingering out there that haven't been addressed in one way or another. And so I'm trying to get a handle on what the community is interested in putting in an amendment or a future plan. These plans do come before the Area Commission for approval once they've been designed. So the types of things that we have traditionally seen in this project or in this funding pool include so streetscape improvements like street lighting, street trees, sidewalk installations, sometimes curb improvements. We'll often see various types of bicycle facilities, so sharrows or bike lane installations, bike boulevard installations. We will see park improvements as well. So Fairwood Park had a lot of improvement to exercise equipment and playgrounds, shelter houses, things like that. So it's just one avenue that we can look for these types of projects to get completed. Kathy, did I touch on everything you wanted me to talk about?
Yeah, specific to the Parsons walkability study and the UIRF, is there any linkage there where the results of that might become projects, or is that, you think, smaller, city budget funding type activities?
So I don't think there's a formal linkage, but that's where I think folks like us can really help shape that and bring those things to fruition. So yes, I would love to see when we get the results of a walkability study. I think that will give us a lot of good information about what we could look at. But for that study, because they're already putting other significant resources in it, we might not have to use UIRF. So there might be, that might just be other, division of traffic capital improvement. The other thing that goes along with that, and they're just kicking it off now, is the Vision Zero action plan. So Vision Zero is a global initiative that looks to reduce traffic deaths and serious injuries. And basically that vision is we don't want anybody dying on our roads anymore. It focuses, there's more focus on pedestrians and cyclists, what they term vulnerable road users, because they make up a disproportionate share of serious injuries and deaths on roadways. So that program, like I said, is just kicking off. It's gonna actually change how they evaluate road projects in the future. So I think you're going to see a different lens on pedestrian crossings, safe bicycle routes, et cetera, and how the city funds things in the future. And what comes out of this pedestrian study on Parsons, I think will also feed right into that program. So I think staying close to both of those, and whatever comes up first might be an interesting way to address those concerns. And so I think we'll just plug it into whatever funding stream is first available and makes the most sense.
Are there other parts of the South Side commercial corridors that have Vision Zero concerns, whether it's Front Street or High Street or Lockbourne or even Livingston?
Yes, I think I'll have to pull it up to be sure. But I think all of those are on what they call the high injury network. So if you go to columbus.gov/Vision Zero, you can actually pull up a map, and it lights up these streets in red and orange that comprise what they call the high injury network. So these are places where you're seeing a disproportionate share of serious crashes. And Parsons is lit up in bright red. Most of South High Street is pretty red. Livingston also very red. I believe Lockbourne is as well. So there's definitely some overlap there. And I think you'll see the city, focusing resources over, prioritizing those corridors for improvement.
And are you,
High Street's one that I think too, we don't have very good access to cross the street, especially for pedestrians.
Absolutely. Are you aware of any major projects or, major minor projects on any of those other roads? I mean, at one time High Street was supposed to be a target for a road diet. Are you aware of any other projects that are already committed in this area?
Committed, I'm not sure, but I am still hearing South High Street being talked about. So I think it's probably coming up. Transportation projects have a very long lead time before they come to fruition. So they tend to be studied, and kind of general design comes up, and then it can be a very long time before they get funding. And that's just a function of how the state and federal and then local funding streams run. So it's not uncommon to see a project, once you're kind of committed to doing it, be 5 years, out to breaking ground on construction, especially if it's a major, full resurfacing and including restriping and reconfiguration. So I think that one's still being looked at. I haven't seen any or been a part of really getting down to the nitty gritty sort of planning on that corridor, but I do think it's on the list. Parsons was done more recently, so it, apart from some of the pedestrian improvements, I don't think we're going to see a major revamping or project at Parsons anytime soon. But I think some of those other corridors very likely could be. I think the other thing, I'm sure that you guys have talked a little bit about the Link Us program, which kind of came out of the Insight 2050 corridors. That Southeast corridor looks like Parsons is sort of, the imagined corridor that goes down. So that will bring intense planning and kind of redesign efforts. Right now they're working on the first two, which is a northwest and then the east-west along kind of Broad Street. So those are underway. My guess is that the southern one is probably a lower tier. So I would guess we might be the 5th of the 5 link up corridors that get planned, but those activities are starting. And that's a pretty long, I'm participating in some of the planning activities on those, and it seems to be a pretty long planning process with lots of opportunities for community engagement. So when I hear that we're starting on the south side, we'll definitely make sure that all of you with PAMA are plugged in.
So Blake, I know, when East Public was developed, that there's the new crosswalk. I mean, how successful would you say, we are with getting people across Parsons? Do you have a perspective on that?
Yeah. So that, the crosswalk was a little serendipitous, I think. That kind of happened in conjunction with some of the changes on Parsons with removing some of the lights and stuff that were well in the works way before we started our development. So that crosswalk has been a game changer. Parsons is still pretty active, fast street. And I think without that crosswalk, it'd be virtually impossible to cross the street safely. And especially right at that intersection there, with the lane getting reduced from 2 to 1 right at that point, right before the crosswalk. Yeah. Thanks.
And Carla, I'm going to call on you as a representative of Nationwide Children's now. I know that there's been various conversations, right, about safety for hospital employees crossing Livingston, especially. Is there anything that you're aware of that we need to be aware of related to the children's, employees?
Not right now. I know obviously we continue to get reports about safety concerns. I know that a couple have been called in from you guys. I've received some concerns from Kathy and Curtis, etc. Those are always reported to our safety and security team. They're consistently in working with the City of Columbus and also CPD, because there are a lot of concerns right there at the corner of Livingston and Parsons. But definitely, as things continue to develop, one of the larger things that came on board was the traffic light by Behavioral Health Pavilion. And that was something that people had wanted for a very long time, but we needed to be able to demonstrate that the need was there for it. As you see, it's up and running right now. So that was one successful thing.
That plus just, the completion of the Livingston Avenue construction work,
yes,
which was very difficult for many of us.
Yeah, so one of the things that Vision Zero is working on that I'm personally very excited about is one of their action items is to revise the city's design manual for roadways with this kind of pedestrian bike friendly lens in it. Because right now, I think we've had a number of projects where they said we're either going to take out a light or like we're not going to put in a painted crosswalk there, or other things that make a pedestrian crossing more visible and safer. And they're based on design guidelines from the feds that have gone back decades that really didn't prioritize those things at all. Really didn't. It was all about moving cars, and pedestrians were something that impeded the flow of cars, and so it just didn't quite jive. There's a lot, you look at many of these national organizations like the National Association of Transportation Officials, they have some newer, more innovative guidelines around things that use, some brighter colors, some more visible markings that can improve safety, that can help drivers, see that better to slow down. And so we're getting people across roadways in a better way. So I think one of the things we may see is that the city is going to be moving towards some of those types of improvements into the design manual. And so hopefully that'll mean you don't have to meet quite so high of a bar of pedestrian traffic to get certain types of control, like lights or pedestrian flashers or things like that, that will just make it, I think, work a lot better for those folks who are trying to, whether it's crossing from, the children's parking over to, the building that they're working in, or from the neighborhood across, or people crossing Parsons. I think that long term, that could have a really big impact in how people are able to move about in those crosswalk improvements.
And I guess the only other thing I want to add, in the interest again of equity is, the NCR corridor is Parsons Avenue from Livingston to 104, but I think we want to engage more with the Lockbourne area, where perhaps their interests haven't been as attended to, perhaps. As we talked about earlier in the first part of the conversation.
No, I think you're right. I think in particular, there's lots of opportunities for improving the pedestrian experience up and down that corridor, whether it's with, better sidewalks, more crosswalks, finding more points to, slow traffic so that people can get across. I totally agree. I'd love to work with you all, and, if you have ideas on that. There are other things too, like lighting, I think, is one thing. So lighting can have a huge impact on pedestrian safety. Most crashes that involve pedestrians happen at night. So better illumination, I think can be good for a whole host of things especially along those kind of commercial corridors. So I think that's something to keep in mind too with the UIRF that could be interesting to think about.
So we've got a few minutes left. I'm just going to open it up if anybody has questions for Erin or any other comments they want to make on any of these topics. Or
this is Sarah. I just wanted to say thank you guys for kind of reminding me, since I don't live and breathe in urban development, about some of these topics, and to Kathy's comment around equity and thinking about other parts of the community, and just how those neighborhoods are incorporated in some of this development work. And I know Erin and I reached out about the Livingston corridor at one point for Vision Zero, and like maybe not having a lot of feedback submitted. So if I'd be willing to help and be involved, however, that's conducive to some of these efforts that you guys are leading through the commission in the South Side. But thank you guys for kind of reminding me about all these different initiatives around urban development in the South Side.
Thanks, Sarah.
If I can add one more thing that's a little bit more around planning. So we had a fantastic conversation in the Public Services Committee with the Planning Division, because I think this ties into some of the zoning as well as into the transportation. And I think these three things all work together in harmony. So the city did the update to their sort of planning code, the C2P2, but we still have a South Side plan that, although we've adopted the C2P2, it doesn't quite fit then with the new guidelines. So we've asked the city, and they seemed amenable to helping figure out sort of a crosswalk between the old plan and the new C2P2 terms, because some of those density recommendations and mixed use recommendations increased. And so having a better handle on that in a publicly available place, I think will be helpful with some of the zoning considerations. And we have people, referring back to what the South Side plan says should be along a certain corridor. We want to make sure that that's up to date. We asked to go into a full replanning process, and we're kind of told that it's not our turn yet in line. But I think a lot of us are thinking about that and wanting to make sure that as we go through the zoning code update and they're doing some of these other planning revisions, that these things are working hand in glove with one another and supporting each other, so that when we have corridors and we have planned for those places that make sense for higher density, that shouldn't just be R2F, that can and should support more than that, and because they're also supported by transit and other kinds of things. And so making sure that those planning documents and the zoning code both support that to make that more seamless. and have less of these really long approval processes. So I just want to say that I think that there's a group in the area commission who's being very thoughtful across multiple committees on how those things fit together to try and smooth that process out.
Yeah, and just as a reminder, the northeast corner of the south side is actually not in the south side plan. It's actually in the near east side plan. So I wasn't even aware of that until fairly recently, which is funny because I was part of the south side planning conversation a long time ago. So we need to kind of remind ourselves that, you know, our boundaries and other people's boundaries aren't necessarily the same.
Yeah, that's an interesting one that as I was going back through the Southside plan with a meticulous comb and was like, why is this big block just kind of carved out? So I think that's, Kathy, that's a great reminder that I'd love to have a conversation with planning about how do we, is there a way to align these plans better with the approval body area commissions that we have in place over these things? Because that's really odd if they're going to a different area commission to approve a land use plan in the South Side area commission territory.
Yeah, and I don't think that, I think the area commissions are aligned. It's the plans that aren't aligned. And Erin, one more ask I'm gonna make of you is if you could email me a few links that we can include with the recording, you know, on Vision Zero or Link Us or anything else that you think would be helpful for people to do a little more study on, that would be great.
Absolutely. That's easy.
Great. All right, any other questions, comments?
Thanks, Erin.
I can just add one little point on the whole zoning thing that Curtis was talking about earlier. If there's any one big takeaway I would have is that the application process for any kind of zoning variance or special permit needs great support for new applicants and seasoned applicants alike on who to talk to, when to talk to, what you're submitting, how you're submitting it. And then once you submit the application and pay the fee, how you interact with this area commissions, who you talk to, when you talk to. Is it on the applicant to follow up and follow through, or is the city going to do that? That is a big gray area that even I today have problems with sometimes, and I have deep relationships with everyone I'm talking to and every application I submit. If there's any big thing, like that's a place that would be like level one help that I'd just like to put out there.
I completely agree, Blake. But
Oh, and I agree too. We have one little teeny project, and we were brand new and had no idea.
even not being brand new, sometimes you feel like you have no idea. You can cross the street and it's like a new world.
Yeah, and I think that's the standardization that the city wants to eventually do. And they're having pushback from some folks because, you know, every zoning chair does stuff totally different. You know, some will just walk out to a location, come back to the commission and say, yeah, Erin, Synk, vote yes for this. And Erin's like, oh, okay, not a problem. Whereas we have more of a robust process, you know, of, you know, doing the site meetings and, you know, and then we're one of three civics or one of three commissions that let the civics engage. So that's part of the other caveat is that there's another wheel in there for 3 of the areas out of the 20 some that is an equation. But to both of your points, yeah, it needs to be streamlined, that this is the process and this is how it flows. And the city has done not a good job of, you know, putting that into place over the years. They've just kind of let every neighborhood do their own thing. And for a developer, it's a hunt and peck.
Yeah, that's a different part of Director Stevens' org, not the part that we're inviting for next month's meeting, but I think that we can continue that conversation. So thanks, Blake, also for your feedback. And thank you, Erin, Synk, for coming. Thank you for everybody that's been able to attend. And we'll get this recorded and posted and share some links, and we'll have Our next meeting will be the first Wednesday of April. Have a great month.
Thanks, Kathy.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye.